All right. We got another fine lesson on the bread of life. This is bread of life lesson part 3. I think by the time we get through this, it'll probably be 5 parts total. Last week we learned some things through the bloodline of Judah. The Messiah was to come through, and we see that Judah messed this up by impregnating his daughter-in-law. One of the things I did not mention in last week's lesson was why his Tamar, his daughter-in-law, got impregnated. So what we need to do is we need to turn over to Genesis 38. We're going to start there and look at this a little bit, the story. Okay, so we're going to look at verses 1 through 11 of Genesis 38. And it came to pass that at that time that Judah went down from his brethren, and he turned into a certain Adullamite, whose name was Hira. And Judah saw there was a daughter of a certain Canaanite, whose name was Shua. And he took her and went in unto her, and she conceived and bare a son, and he called his name Er. And she conceived again and bare a son, and called his name Onan. And she yet again conceived and bare a son, and called his name Shelah. And he was at Chezio when she bare him. And Judah took a wife for his son, his firstborn, whose name was Tamar. And Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord slew him. And Judah said unto Onan, Go unto thy brother's wife, and marry her, and raise up seed to thy brother. And Onan knew that the seed should not be his, and it came to pass that when he went into his brother's wife, that he spilled it on the ground, lest that she should give seed to his brother. And the thing which he did displeased the Lord, wherefore he slew him also. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, Remain a widow at thy father's house, until Shelah my son be grown. For he said, Lest peradventure he die also, and as his brethren did. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. All right, so we see here Jewish law. On the death of a male spouse, it was the responsibility of the brother, the younger brother, to raise and have children with the widow. Okay. We see here in these verses here, was a wicked man. He wasn't wicked very long because he died. God took him out of the picture. So then it was Onan's job to fulfill the law and to raise children with Er's wife Tamar. And he didn't like the idea, and he disobeyed God's law. When he did that, God took him out of the picture. All right, so he died. So what Judah did here is he promised Tamar that she would have the youngest son to have a family with. Okay, so obviously he was too young to have children yet, so he was a minor. But Tamar was okay with that. She was okay that she had to wait for Shelah because he was still a child. So Tamar went to wait with her family and for her family. All right. Now, after Shelah was grown up, Judah never fulfilled this promise, and she wanted a family. So she took matters into her own hand. And then we see later on in these verses here that she dressed up like a harlot and seduced Judah as he was traveling from shearing sheep. Come back from that. This is after Judah's wife had already passed away, and she seduced Judah. And in the process of this, she got pregnant by Judah. Now, because of that, he was cursed. The curse of Judah was to be 10 generations later before that curse would be lifted. And we found that out last week. And it was fulfilled when we get to David, and that's where the curse was lifted and no longer affecting the line of Judah. Now, if we go back to Matthew chapter 1, and Matthew chapter 1, we're going to see verses 3 through 8. We see Judas begat Pharez and Zerah and of Thamar. Okay, so that's the story we just talked about. She had twins, and Pharez and Zerah. Out of the two, Pharez was the firstborn, because we see here the second name after Thamar. Pharez begat Ezra. So, and it goes on down to the generations past that. Now, notice that this time I said generations and not genealogy. And there's a reason for that, because I stand corrected from last week's lesson on a couple of things. Well, one of the things, this is not actual genealogy, this is generational, because there are names that are left out in this genealogy. So it can't be a genealogy, it's a generational thing. So last week I should have said generations instead of genealogy. We also see in these verses here, I mentioned last week that Tamar was a harlot, Rachab was a harlot, Ruth the Moabite, all the Moabites were idolaters, they worshipped idols. Bathsheba and David were adulterers. But we see God's grace in all this. So we see it all through the Old Testament. So from Abraham to Christ, there are 42 generations, and broken into 3 groups of 14. And we can see that down here in Matthew 17. And it says, so all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations. And from David unto the carrying away unto Babylon, there are 14 generations. And from carrying away into Babylon unto Christ are 14 generations. Now, there's some stuff with that. We see, one of the things we see in this is it has something to do, and I got to study this a little bit more to get a little bit more knowledge on it, but it has something to do with Daniel's prophecy of 70 weeks or 490 years. And that's the time from the cutoff to the time Christ is returned. That's something I have to study and get some more insight on. I just didn't have the time to indulge into that as we went into this. But one other thing we see in the generations that Matthew left out in verse 8. So if we go here to verse 8, it says, and Judas begat Pharez, and Zerah and Thamar, and Pharez begat Ezram, and Ezram begat Aram. 3 names were left out here: Ahaz, Joash, and Amaziah. Okay, now why is that? Joram married Athaliah. Now that's in 2 Kings 8. Okay, we see that now in the Old Testament. Well, who is that? Okay, the parents of Ahaziah. Okay, so we have Ahaziah, Joash, and Amaziah. The parents, Joram and Athaliah, that's the name. They married and had Ahaziah. They also had a grandchild named Joash. And then they were the great-grandparents of Amaziah. Well, why were they left out? Well, Joram married Athaliah, And Athaliah was the daughter of Ahab. Ahab led Israel with Jezebel's help into the worship of Baal. So they were not of the actual royal line that worshiped God truly, and that's why Matthew left them out of here, because they were not true followers of God. They were worshiping Baal, and any ties in with that. Okay, well, why would he leave them out? The answer to that is in Exodus. Let's go to Exodus 20. Okay, Exodus 20, known as Ten Commandments. All right. Let's look down at number 5. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them. Well, let's go back up to 4. It says, Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven images, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God. Here's the part right here coming up. Visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. So those generations there, with Ahaziah, Joash, and Amaziah, they were cut off because of that curse in the Old Testament. So that's why they were left out of the genealogy or the generations here. The law with the curse, the third and fourth generation. So we can see why Matthew left them out. Matthew, we know as a tax collector, so he was very good on math, and he was a good mathematician. So he compared all this, put us all together, and figured out the 14, 14, and 14. So let's see here. We see Matthew skillfully organized the royal generations of King Jesus with 3 sets of 14 names, and does so by omitting them from the generation of Christ due to the relationship with Ahab. And there was also another name that was left out, and we're going to see that one here in a second. So we go back to Matthew, and the name was Jehoaz. He was the firstborn of Josiah. So hold your place there, Matthew. We're going to turn to 2 Chronicles, and we're going to see some of this. 2 Chronicles 36. And verses 1 through 3. 2 Chronicles 36, 1 through 3. Then the people of the land took Jehoaz, the son of Josiah. Okay, so there we can see Jehoaz was the son, or the father of Jehoaz. Jehoaz was the son of Josiah. There we go. I think I got it right. Made him king in his father's stead in Jerusalem. And Jehoaz was 23 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. And the king of Egypt put him down at Jerusalem and condemned the land 100 talents of gold. Now, okay, so Jehoaz was only king for 3 months. In that 3-month time period, the Pharaoh of Egypt at that time lured him away, and he died in Egypt. And then turned around and put his younger brother, Eliakim, in charge. So if we hold our place in Matthew still, and turn back to 2 Kings 23. So 2 Kings 23. And verse 34, where we see this. And Pharaoh Nechoth, okay, that's the Pharaoh, made Eliakim, the son of Josiah, king of the son of Josiah, king in the room of Josiah his father, and turned his name to Jehoiakim. Okay, so the Pharaoh changed his name and took Jehoaz, his older brother, away, and there he came to Egypt, and there he died. So we can see it recorded here. That's where his older brother died. He was the actual true appointed king, but he did not really get to serve only 3 months before he was taken out of the picture. And so from that point on, Jehoiakim was the one that was the one to reign. And it says here, Jehoiakim gave the silver and gold to Pharaoh, but he taxed the land to give it money according to the commandments of the Pharaoh. So he did some shady dealings is what he was doing, and he basically probably had his brother killed so that he could rule in his place. That's just speculation, that's not proven, but I can see when it talks about silver and gold, there's usually money involved, and that's probably what happened. He wanted the power that his brother had that he was not even entitled to. So now we go back to Matthew, and Matthew 1:11 there says, and Josiah begat Jeconiah. Okay, so we can see Jehoiakim was left out of the picture here. He was left out of the generations because of his evil doings and the way he got the power. So he was rejected. Jehoaz, younger brother, also the puppet of Pharaoh. Eliakim was his name originally. He changed his name, had his name changed to Jehoiakim, and he was rejected as a true king. Now, the name here after Josiah is Jeconiah. Okay? It's also Jehoiakim and Conius. Now, he was the last king before the Babylonian captivity, and it's time to get your shovels and picks out, because we're going to go a little deeper with this so we can get a clear understanding, and you'll see the point at the end of the lesson, I'm hoping. Go back to 2 Chronicles 36. 2 Chronicles 36, and we're going to read there at verse 9. And Jehoiachin was 8 years old when he began to reign. And he reigned 3 months and 10 days in Jerusalem, and he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. Okay, so 8 years old. Basically, that's the age of most third graders. Okay, can you imagine ruling a kingdom at 8 years old? The only thing I can remember about third grade is getting cracks at school for disobeying the teacher by getting the paddle, the board of education. That's about all I can really remember about third grade. It seemed like that was the hobby of Mrs. Littler, of cracking kids every day. She would line up half the class, and like I said, it was like her favorite hobby. So I can't even imagine being a ruler of a nation at the age of 8. But there's some discrepancies here. All right, so hold your place here, and we're going to look over in 2 Kings 24. And it's interesting, a lot of people try to discredit the Bible for these discrepancies, but we're going to try to make something clear here and show that God rules, and he always will. 2 Kings 24 and verse 8. And Jehoiachin was 18 years old when he began to reign, and reign in Jerusalem 3 months. All right. So it's a little different here. It's 18, not 8. Now, there's 2 different speculations on this. One was a misprint by a scribe on the original manuscripts from the one that was written in 1 Kings versus the one that was written in 2 Chronicles, or 2 Kings, the one that was written in 2 Chronicles. The number 8, I don't really have the board here, but the symbol is it goes up and there's a cross piece and it goes down in Hebrew. Okay? That's what it looks like, just like a half a box, or a box with no bottom on it, put it that way. It's very similar to that. The 18 has 2 little hash marks, real small. Remember Jesus talking about every jot and tittle? Okay, it has 2 little marks like that and another little bit longer mark after that. Those could have been left off in the 2 Chronicles transcription. However, there's also another reason this is probably so. And I kind of like this one a little bit better because more than the doing of all that. There's not enough evidence in these 2 discrepancies that discredit the Bible. This could have been 2 different recordings about a time period in his life. When he was 18 is when he actually took charge and ruled. At the age of 8 was whenever he was sitting beside his father and he was a co-ruler or a co-regent, and he was learning how to rule. So at the age of 8, he could have been right beside his father while his father ruled until he became 18, and at that point we have the 2 different writings in here of his age. And I tend to like to believe the second one, because even at 18, someone just to hand you the keys to the kingdom and say, here, it's yours. I don't think that would happen. It would be like, you're going to sit up here and you're going to watch what we do, and you're going to learn at an early age how to rule these people. And I think that would probably, it's no different than like the princes, how they would rule in the medieval time period. They would learn from their father how to rule, and it was not just an overnight hand them the keys thing. All right, so hopefully everybody's got that understood, and we notice that God's reign rules once again. Now, I have a tendency to not believe that it was a misprint by a scribe. It could have been, but more likely, I think it was the co-regent or co-ruler activity that went on. So, either way, this is not going to disprove the Bible, the scriptures at all, due to the fact that you look at what was said afterwards. The ruling time period was the same, very short ruling on that. He had a short career, 3 months and 10 days. Jeremiah also had some things to say about it. Now, this is, we had the different names for him, okay? Coniah, Jeconiah, and Jehoiachin are all 3 the same people in the scriptures. Let's look over at Jeremiah. And we're going to go to Jeremiah 22. And starting at verse 24 through 30. As I live, saith the Lord, Coniah, that's who we're talking about here, the son of Jehoiakim, okay, he was the self-appointed ruler of Judah, the signet upon my right hand, yet I would pluck thee thence. I will give thee into the hand of them that seek thy life, and into the hand of them whose face thou fearest, even into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, and into the hand of the Chaldeans. And I will cast thee out and thy mother that bare thee into another country, where ye were not born, and there shall ye die. But to the land whereon they desire to return thither, they shall not return. Is this man Conaniah a despised broken idol? He is a vessel wherein is no pleasure. Wherefore they are cast out, and he and his seed, and they are cast into a land which they know not. O earth, 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 hear the words of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord, write ye this man childless, a man that shall not prosper in his days, for no man of his seed shall prosper, sitting on the throne of David and ruling any more in Judah. With that last verse, where is the Messiah supposed to come from at this point? He is cursed, and he's in Matthew, okay? He's in the bloodline. So, but it says here very distinctly in verse 30, thus saith the Lord, write this down, this man childless, a man that shall not prosper in his days, no man of his seed no man of his seed shall prosper. None of his generations were going to prosper at that point. And by prosper, it means that they will not rule as king. If we go back to Matthew, we can see this again in verse 11 there. It says they were carried away, where? To Babylon. And from that point forward, there was no king in Israel whatsoever. So that cut off the lineage of the rulership, and there was a curse put upon him at that point. And from that point forward, no. Let's see. It says, sitting upon the throne of David and ruling any more in Judah. No one's going to rule over Judah anymore. So right there we see the line cut off. How in the world is Messiah supposed to come through King David at this point? All right? It says he's supposed to be childless. In this word childless, this means he shall not prosper and shall not be king. He had children, but he did not have children to rule. And that's what you need to understand on verse 30 there back in Jeremiah 22. Now, childless, not in the sense of barren, but in the truth that none of his children would be king. And furthermore, none of their children would be king. So how is the Messiah supposed to come from this point forward? From this point forward, the Jewish people would be ruled over by the Gentiles. Thus, this brings us back to Matthew again, all right? Matthew 1:16. And Matthew 1:16 says, and Jacob begat Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was born Jesus, who is called Christ. All right? So we see from the Babylonian captivity, they kept track of all the firstborn clear up to Joseph. This is interesting. The word we see with Joseph, there's no begats. Joseph didn't begat Jesus. All right? Joseph had Joseph been the father of Jesus, Jesus would have inherited the curse spoken of there in Jeremiah. Okay? And there he was not going to be allowed to be king. He did not inherit that curse. That curse was broken through Mary. Mary, the husband, or Joseph, let me read that again from the verse. The husband of Mary. Okay? Joseph, the husband of Mary. So it was going to be Mary and God to make the bloodline complete. Now, let's go over to 1 Chronicles. Or wait a minute, we already did that one. Let's go to, okay, one other thing here. The word of whom in here, we see that after Mary. Okay? That in the Greek text is a feminine construction. Of whom means the feminine part there of Mary. Women were not usually mentioned in genealogies at all. It was always the male. But we see here, this is a generational thing that Matthew did, and he included women in the bloodline. Now, so through Mary, this was supposed to happen. Not only was Jesus legally to be king through the bloodline, he had the right to become king through Mary. And the Gentiles ruled the Jewish nations at that time, and there was no kingship for the Jews. So Jesus could not exercise those rights. He could if he wanted to, but he chose to not to exercise those rights. He had the right to do it, but he didn't do it. He could have if he wanted to, but Jesus himself also said one thing. Remember what he said to Pilate? He said to Pilate that this is not his kingdom. His kingdom is not of this world. Okay? Let's turn over to Isaiah. We're going to put a few more things into this. Turn to Isaiah 8. I get there. There we go. Isaiah 8. And chapter 8 and verse 14. Now, we've seen all these things about Jesus, and we're going to look some more, and we're going to look at him here as a rock. Isaiah 8:14, it says, "He shall be a sanctuary, but for a stone of stumbling, and for a rock of offense to both the houses of Israel, for a gin and a snare to the inhabitants of Jerusalem." All right, let's turn over to Isaiah 28. Okay, 28:16. "Therefore, thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I lay in Zion for a foundation, a stone, tried stone, a precious cornerstone, sure foundation, that he that believeth shall not make haste." All right, then we're going to go over to, chapter 2 of Daniel talks about a mighty stone. We won't read all that, but we understand that through the dream that he had with Nebuchadnezzar dream. But the mighty stone was a representation of Christ, that he will destroy all the nations. And this is where they had a problem. They thought Jesus was going to be that stone that destroyed everything. No, he destroyed their mindset of what God wanted in their lives. Now, let's go to the New Testament. 1 Peter. Peter pulls this all together. 1 Peter 2 and 16. And 2:16. I'm sorry, 6 through 9, not 16. It says, "Wherefore it contained in the scripture, Behold, I lay in Zion a chief cornerstone, elect, precious, and he that believeth on him shall not be confounded." Have you learned anything this morning? If you learned something, you're not confounded. "Unto you therefore which believe he is precious, but unto them which be disobedient, the stone which the builders disallowed, the same is made the head of the corner. And a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense to them which stumble at the word. being disobedient, wherefore unto they also were appointed. But ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people, and that ye should show forth the praises of him who hath called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Now, let's go back to our original scripture text of John 6:35. John 6:35 in closing here. Remember John? This is what we're studying in the book of John, right? All right. John 6:35. And Jesus said unto them, I am the bread of life. Jesus is the I am, and he's more. He is a lot more than the bread of life. We can see through those Old Testament scriptures the great I am and who he was. God bless you all today.